I'm Daniel Kopp, certified financial planner and financial therapist, and welcome to the Widow Life and Money podcast. As the founder of Wise Stewardship Financial Planning, I've come to appreciate the profound changes that grief can introduce into our lives. My goal is to share insights that I've learned as both a financial planner and widower to support you in your own journey through the challenges of loss. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome Taryn Davis, whose incredible journey showcases both the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of community. From high school sweethearts to military spouse, Taryn's story takes us through the joy of young love and the depths of unexpected loss. Her experiences highlight the courage it takes to find growth amid grief. Join us as Taryn recounts the early days of her grief and the path that led her to found the American Widow Project. This project offers a testament to her unwavering spirit and her commitment to fostering a supportive community for military widows. We delve into the profound impact of shared experiences, the strength found in unexpected places, and the journey of rebuilding life after loss. Thank you for being a part of our community. Let's explore these shared stories together, embracing the hope and healing that comes with time and moving towards a future filled with possibility and peace. Taryn, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here. I know that your story is going to be one of encouragement, of someone who's been walking this journey for a long time, that grief journey, but also who has taken what you've learned personally, what our friend Carolyn Moore of Modern Winners Club talks about, this idea of going from grief to growth, taking those hard-earned lessons and sharing them with others. So I'm really excited to share with your story with our listeners, the impact that you've made, the work that you're doing. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my path and hopefully it resonates with a few of your listeners.
Yeah. Let's go back to how you first entered military life. What was that like for you? How did you ultimately end up as a military spouse? Tell us that initial story of you as a couple.
So, Michael and I were high school sweethearts, met in marching band, and separated when we started college. And I received a call from him. I guess it was probably the year was 2005. We were in the midst of, right at that point of Iraq and Afghanistan. Michael, he had a full ride through college. It was the last thing I expected him to say, but he told me, he said, I'm joining the Army. And I'd love to reconnect with you before I head to basic training. And we reconnected, and I wrote him a letter every day during his basic training. And by the end of the basic training, he went off to his second form of training, which was airborne training. And at that point, I think we were calling ourselves officially back together. And he finally got his duty station in Alaska. And he called me and he said, I'm going to be stationed in Alaska. And I was a sophomore in college at that point. And I said, well, you know what? I don't want to miss out on any time with you if you end up getting deployed. So I'll go to Alaska and go to college there. And he was like, are you kidding me? I obviously did not watch enough National Geographic as a child because once I got there, I realized why he was so shocked that I would go. It's a dark and cold place in December. But when I told him, yeah, I'll go there and we can just spend as much time as we have with each other before you get deployed, he was like, okay, let me call you back. And he called me back about 30 minutes later. And he said, would you marry me? And I was 19 at that point.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, oh my God, this was like when Teen Mom was at its like prime. I'm like, oh my God, I don't expect myself to be a married. But he said, I know what I want and I want to spend my life with you, and why wait? And I couldn't argue with that because I felt the same way. So he finished his airborne training, came back home to Texas, proposed, and 3 months later, we had our wedding in Austin, Texas. And 2 days later, I was in Anchorage, Alaska, where I spent 7 months there before he finally received his orders to get deployed to Baghdad, Iraq. And we said our goodbyes. I went back to Texas, and he began his, at that point, 12-month deployment to Baghdad, Iraq.
Yeah. Wow. What a change for you of life path in some ways, and certainly of location and culture. Did you have any idea what you were going to get into as far as like any family members who had been in the military, any exposure of what that kind of lifestyle looked like before you got married?
I had no clue. My grandfather served in World War II, but I mean, that was a very long time ago, but really no experience. Michael's father had been in, I believe, the Navy, but I think everybody was shocked to hear he wanted to join the Army, B, combat, and C, during a time of conflict. It was very shocking. But when I asked him why, he said, I just feel like I want to be making a difference in my life, and I don't feel like I'm doing that right now. And I feel like this is the best way for me to do that. And Michael wasn't a very talkative person, so when he did say something, you knew that he'd really put a lot of thought into it. It wasn't something he graduated basic at the top of his class, airborne at the top. He was the best at whatever he put his mind to.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that insight in there. And I see just the way in which even now the pride shines through at the excellence that he demonstrated. So, big culture shock, right? Joining this army life, trying to figure out now, moving across the country, settling into a new sort of circle and friends, and all the social rules and everything that goes along with military life. Do you remember what that culture shock was like? How did that interact with other parts of your life, especially in that time frame before he deployed?
Well, we decided he wanted us to live off base, and so I really only met other wives when they had kind of meetings for the spouses. And look, I was a nerd in high school. I was not in cliques. I was not in anybody's little circle. I just kind of like floated around. But when you're out in Alaska and your spouse is really in training, probably not even in the same city as you most of the time, you really start to rely on these women. They become your backbone. And in such a remote place,
Yeah,
too, so many of those spouses were my lifeline. And really kind of got me through the time that I was there in Alaska.
yeah. So interesting. So he's deployed, and what happens next? Keep the story going.
So I moved back home, went back to college over at Texas State. We talked via Instant Messenger, AOL Instant Messenger on video. And he surprised me about 8 months into his deployment with his R&R, where we spent 2 wonderful weeks together. And I remember when I dropped him back off at the airport, I was just like, let's go to Canada. Let's go to Mexico. Like, you don't have to go back. And with that same certainty, he told me, they need me over there. And he called me on May 21st. This was back in 2007 at this point. We talked on AOL. He had to get off pretty abruptly. And I remember I actually saved that conversation. Luckily, I had it typed out, but I just said, he's like, I need to go. He couldn't tell me what he was doing. And I was like, well, I just want you to know I love you more than life itself. And I know that sounds cheesy, but like, I hope you know that. I don't know why, right? It's kind of like, I
Mm,
think any widow looks back at your last conversations and you're just like, did something in me know? Did something in me not want to know? Um, and he said, that's so sweet, baby. I'll love you and I'll call you when I get back. And I went on with my day. It was a beautiful day. There was no forecast of husband dying in the weather. And I remember I went to my parents at night for dinner. My dad was out of town on business. I was watching a show when my parents' phone rang, and it was my neighbor who was a close friend with my parents. And I remember my sister handed it to me. She's like, it's Danny. And I thought that was so weird. It's 9 o'clock at night. Why is my neighbor calling me? And I said, hey, Danny, what's up? He's like, Taryn, you need to come home. And I'm like, why? And he's like, there's some people here that need to see you. And I'm like, who are they? And he's like, I can't tell you. And at that point, the pieces start falling together. The pre-deployment meeting all the families went to, I remember they said if they're injured, you'll get a phone call, and if they're killed, you'll have someone notify you in person. And so without him saying it, I was just like, who is it? I just wanted him to say who it was. And he was like, I can't tell you, but you need to come home. And I just remember running up the stairs to wake up my mom because I couldn't drive. And I was like, I need to get home. And what is Michael okay? And it's like the longest 7-minute drive. I just remember I was praying out loud the whole time, like, dear Lord, let it be an injury. Dear Lord, let it be an injury. And when I drove up and I saw the two men in the same uniform that I had married Michael in, uh, at that point, my mind at least knew he was gone.
Yeah.
And it's like the movies, I remember just thinking like, okay, normally in the movies, they're supposed to knock at my door, but I'm coming out of a car. So what should I do? And I remember I got out of the car. I told my mom calmly, just stay here. And I walked over to the porch and I sat down on the chair and I faced them and I let them walk up to me. And they say the words that probably every military spouse whose spouse is killed in action has burned into their mind, which is the Secretary of Defense regrets to inform you that your husband was killed. And then it's just all a blur. And at that point, then my body caught up with my mind and, screaming, I'm dry heaving, I'm just on the ground. It's those types of deaths, those sudden and unexpected ones, they're so traumatic in every way on a person's mind and body.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of so many of the own client experiences that I've had the chance to talk to people, and the difference that comes with a unexpected death versus one that has a prelude, whether with a long disease or a terminal illness and things like that. The researchers call that anticipatory grief,
Mm-hmm.
which changes when the actual ultimate passing comes, versus in this case, like a bolt from the blue, and suddenly it's like the earthquake. Everything is shattered, everything is broken in an instant, and it's so altering in every way at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's even more difficult
So
because
you,
he was already gone. I wasn't used to him coming home every night at that point. So
yeah,
it's hard for, I think, a spouse in that situation to really comprehend, like, he's dead until, ultimately their body is returned home.
yeah, yeah. Even though it's something that every person, certainly in that stage of military life, um, has an idea of what could happen, it always feels like, no, that'll happen to someone else. That won't happen here. And yet here you are on this side of grief. Looking back now with the benefit of time and hindsight and perspective, what stands out to you about like that sharpness of grief, the unexpected nature of it? Again, thinking of our listeners who are so much earlier on, about the intensity of that feeling.
First, I want to know what you said. I think I was militantly optimistic. I always wanted to believe he would come home. I think that living in a state of thinking he could die, something could happen. That's not living, right? That's just you're bathed in fear. I was the one that all the spouses called whenever there would be a blackout, which meant someone had died, and so they had to notify the family. So there was no communication at all. So nobody didn't hear. We didn't hear from them for a couple of days. But I was always like, "He's okay. He's okay." And I think I struggled with that after he died. I thought maybe I was being ignorant in not at least having prepared myself for his death. But 18 years later, I actually admire that version of me, because I think if I had thought that way, if something could happen or I could lose him, I would have treated him differently. I would have treated our relationship differently. And I don't think it would have been in a way that I would look back on and be happy about. Like I'm proud of that ignorance in a way. And I think, when it all settles in, you have the funeral, especially with the military one, you have the community around you. But a few weeks pass and you realize like everybody's going back to life. The world keeps turning and I'm over here in a living hell. So it was dark. It was very dark. I remember my mom stopping by and someone had delivered a package and I had my box cutter out. And I remember her just looking at it and she's like, maybe I should take this home with me. I think people just had this fear of like, is she going to do something? And if I didn't have my faith, that maybe I would have, but I was afraid that if I did anything, maybe I wouldn't be able to see Michael again. And that's like kind of what kept me going in the beginning. But there was a lot of just, I didn't sleep, a lot of screaming at God, a lot of just anger, a lot of convincing myself that like maybe, I don't know, I just was trying to numb the pain. I was just trying to tell myself like, oh, like I just didn't want to feel that acute of pain. And you could really have no choice but to feel it or but to numb it. And I really, I felt it. And um, I don't think anybody ever told me what that felt like, because I don't think anybody close to me had ever gone through it. And so I kind of, in a way, had my freedom of feeling it and expressing it the way that I wanted to.
Yeah. Even if someone had gone through it close to you, or even if that someone had told you what it's like, it's 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 not the same. Going
Yeah,
through it, the
I always tell people when people are like, I have no clue what you're going through. And I'm like, good, you're not supposed to until you're here. Like, go live your life. Don't feel what I'm feeling. Like, um, I always tell people it happens to
yeah,
everyone. Deep loss of someone you love, whether it be a spouse or a family member or a child. It happens to all of us. None of us that are alive here on earth will go through that unscathed. I just got a head start. I just got a head start at it.
yeah. You've shared a lot about even just how your family and your mom was there for you. What were the other things that you noticed about the community, especially in those early days, that stands out to you in hindsight?
Well, in the early days, I mean, it was amazing. Uh, I mean, I didn't care. I was just on my bed. They were just trying to make me drink a sip of water. But the amount of people, I think eight or 900 people came to his service that we had. And those were strangers. There's something called the Patriot Guard Riders, which are a group of motorcycle riders that escort service members that have passed on. And to just see hundreds of them lined up at his funeral and escorting me the day of his funeral, there's such a pride that, and such a gratitude for people recognizing the sacrifice. I mean, military only makes up 1% of the population. So to know that that many people came together to honor him, it was amazing. But as a widow, that does not in any way lessen, or at least for me, it didn't lessen the pain. It didn't lessen the amount of grief I was feeling. Um, and after those weeks pass, like I stated, like life keeps turning, and those people, they have to go on with their lives,
Yeah,
and you don't really have a guide to really get you through. And that's ultimately what led me to starting the AWP. Is I was online. This was back in MySpace days. I was like online looking for widows. I remember typing in widow and Google came back with, did you mean window? And I'm like, oh shit, like I'm screwed. Like Google doesn't even have this as like a top like search thing. And the things that I did find, I saw women that were much later in life, in their 70s and 80s. I did
oh
not
yeah,
see a
yeah,
20 something year old on the screen. And that made me feel even more ostracized. But it was actually that moment when I saw the word window and it said, did you mean window? That really, it made me laugh for the first time. Honestly, I was like, man, we're all screwed out here, all of us widows, young widows. And it's what made me decide to start my organization.
wow, that's incredible. We're definitely going to dive more into that, but I want to back up two things before we go on. Is you've referenced your faith several times throughout this, and just seems to me like just hearing your story here and other places about what an anchor and yet challenge that was. Many of our listeners share that same faith, some do not. But I'd love to hear kind of what it feels like now. Again, benefit of time and hindsight, looking back on how that impacted your grief journey.
One of the first books I read after Michael died was by C.S. Lewis, the author of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but it was actually like his journal entries after he lost his wife. And here is this man who, a devout Christian, has written a lot of amazing books about God. And this book, he was so pissed off at God. He was like, it was so raw. And I was like, yes, someone's mad. And I remember he said that the loss felt like a toothache. It's like you felt the pain, but also you went to bed anticipating the pain you would continue feeling the next day. And that's what it felt like. And I just remember reading that and just like, yes. And it took me, I would say, many years, though, actually, because I realized that I was not mad at the man that detonated the explosive that killed my husband. I wasn't mad at the president. I wasn't that sent them out there. I found out that a majority of my anger was at God. Um,
Hmm.
because every night when he was deployed, I'm like, God, can you do this for me? Can you protect him? Can you, if anything's gonna happen, take my life before his? And so when that happened, I was like, screw you, like that wasn't our deal. And so my relationship with God
Yeah.
definitely, it struggled, but it's transformed into one where it's not one where I've had so many amazing moments, and I actually feel Michael the most when I'm the happiest. But before that, I felt like I needed to just block out that higher being, that something out there that had my back. And my relationship transformed over time to realizing that God never left me. He never abandoned me. He's not someone that gets to really, I think, for me personally, I don't believe he um, is up there going, you know what, I'm going to kill him and keep him alive and then like let him live, but not him, and I think that's kind of what I thought he was supposed to be doing at such a young age. I'm like, that's how God does it. He hooks me up. Like, my grandma just died last year. He can't take someone else I really love this year. Like I had created this idea of what God should be and do for me. And now God is not someone that does something for me as much as he's someone that just supports me as I do things for myself and find that willingness within me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it aligns so much with my own experience as well, of like, how Psalm 23 talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. It's like until you have seen what it's like grief raw in the face. I love that book of Lewis, by the way, called The Promise of Pain. Yes, I remember reading it and thinking, I mean, here's, like you said, the unbared, unfettered, just letting full, unleashed emotion of someone who has walked this road, and that searing pain of loss. And the amazing thing, like you said, is Lewis wrote it, you felt it. So many people have shared that same experience of feeling it and directing it at some ways. The only person that you think you can is him, and God takes that and then he just loves back, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of the journey of the maturity. Um, Before Sarah died, one of our close friends always talked about it as he always described her health problems as she's a special jar of clay, like what Paul the apostle talked about in his letter to the church, and talking about like, you know, each of us is made for a specific purpose, specific use, and sometimes for some of us early on, like you said, earlier in life than most, we get to experience some of that pain.
Yeah. Now I look at it and I'm like, I was given the blueprint of how to live life. Like Michael's death gave me that. And my life has been so rich once I realized that it was safe to look at that blueprint and start fulfilling it. Um, and in a way, that's kind of like the same blueprint I think God gives us that so many of us don't see until something traumatic happens.
Yeah, we don't have the benefit of a bigger perspective when we're so much in the weeds sometimes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing I wanted to focus a little bit on is you said, all right, so life is starting to move on. We see this pretty regularly. This is my personal experience. I see this with clients all the time. Somewhere, not always, but generally in that 3-ish, 6-ish month time frame. And you're still there. The grief is still many times so intense. And yet other people have quote unquote moved on, right? Or they're moving forward. And you feel like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to also feel the same way? I still feel this so intensely. What was that like for you, and how did you ultimately reconcile that with what your experience was as the widow is going to be different than other people's grief, who in many ways, in their own ways, missed Michael too.
Mm. I remember I was at a grocery store probably 3 months or 4 months after Michael died. And at that point, I had connected with some widows and we talked a lot. And they made me smile. They made me laugh. And I remember talking to one of them on the phone while I was at the grocery store. And someone that I knew from school saw me smiling. And as she walked by, she's like, "I'm so happy to see you smiling." And at first, I was like, "Oh no," because I think I associated like, I'm over Michael. I'm over his life. I'm over our relationship. I'm over the love, and that's how people are interpreting it. If I am smiling, if I am out living in the world, and I hated that. I wanted people to be like, "No, I'm still like dark inside," but and I still love them more
Yeah.
than anything. But so it was hard at first to navigate that. I did move towns, not far, but like just enough to feel like I had enough space to feel my feelings. And I remember going to a coffee shop too, probably like 4 months afterwards. And someone's like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm really depressed. I kind of want to die every day." And this coffee person's like, "Oh." But I realized like people don't want to hear the truth of how you're feeling, like they don't feel comfortable with it. At least
Yeah.
people that haven't gone through it, they want to ask it. And I realized too that like when Michael first died, everybody wanted to give me a hug. I'm like, I don't want anybody to touch me. And I realized it was to make themselves feel better. Like it made them feel better, their loss of control of my situation, by just showing me some affection, where I'm like, I just want to have a cage around me.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you ever experience it too, where people like projected their own feelings onto you, or like tried to relate in ways that were in actually very awkward?
Oh my God. Like I just lost my cat the other day. I'm like, oh my God. But again, it was another author. Gosh, I read a lot of books. She was a Holocaust survivor and she ended up going into grief work. And she said that some people would come into her office and they would be mourning the loss of their child. And then another person would come in the same day and at the same level of grief were mourning that they didn't get the color of Tesla car that they wanted. And she realized, like, okay, I can't look at their pain and be like, it's not valid because they are grieving
Hmm.
something. Um, and so I have a pretty good sense of humor. So I'm just like, yeah, I let people share. And then I had my own little conversation in my head about it.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
Learn how to put that little wall up
yeah,
there. Yes.
yeah,
Oh man, we could tell lots of stories about that one, I'm sure. But for
yeah.
the sake of time, we're going to press on to this idea of, all right, so you wanted to do something. You didn't feel community. So take us back to those early years of your grief journey, like organizations that you hadn't yet found or weren't yet founded, and what was the gap? What was you seeing was missing that ultimately led you to found American Widow Project?
So I immediately started looking for grief support groups, and the only one I could find in my area was a hospice grief support group. And so I went to it, and I think by the second meeting, I most of these people were later in life, in their 60s and 70s, and I remember every time I would share how I was feeling, somebody in the group would be like, "You have so much life left to live. You can still find somebody. You can still do this. You can still do that." And I was like, "Screw this." I didn't say that. I just didn't go to the next meeting. And one of the gentlemen called me and he was like,
Yeah.
"Taryn, we've missed you. You missed 2 meetings." So I'm like, "Look, I'll be honest. If y'all are just going to tell me how good I have it, like y'all had 60, 50 years with your spouse. I had like 2 years. So I've got 50 or 60 years to think about the time I didn't have with them. And y'all are going to tell me that I have it better?" I was like, "No, I'm not here. I'm not going to put myself in that room." And he was like, "Come and tell them that." And I was like, "All right." And I did. And from that point on, I think they looked at it in a different way. And I remember asking them too. I was like, if you had the choice to lose your significant other at the prime of their life, like they're full of life, they're doing something they love, but you don't get the chance to say goodbye to them, or you have the chance to see them kind of fade slowly, or, in a matter of time, where you just see them not be the person that you knew, but you had the ability to say goodbye. Which one would you choose? And everybody in that room said the ability to say goodbye. I was the only one in that room that didn't get that ability to say goodbye. But I
Yeah.
told myself, you know what? I'm not going to look at this as something that I missed out on. Like, I really do look at Michael's life, and I'm like, how many people can say they died doing what they loved, that they died feeling like they were fulfilling a purpose in their life? And we were young, and our love hadn't been watered down by mortgages and the stress of kids and all of these things that I know
Yeah.
they eventually could happen. But I always tell people, I'm like, I just had the essential oil love with Michael, like that's all I will know
Yeah.
with him. And I'm so grateful for that. It was just, it wasn't diluted yet.
Yeah, that's a beautiful mental image. Thank you for kind of painting the picture. And yeah, there's such a different experience, like you said, with your own grief journey and the stage of life. So you referenced that earlier, right? You weren't finding the window versus widow even when you looked online. So
Yeah, I
how did
remember.
you decide to take that such a bold step?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I went off track, but when I did search, there was Gold Star Wives of America, which were all at that point Vietnam and World War II widows, that were really, their focus was
Yeah. Yeah.
benefits. TAPS was, tragedy assistance program was out there, but at that point, the only type of events they were doing were seminars. And no offense to seminars at
Okay.
hotels, that's just not my bag of chips. I was 21, and I just wanted to know I could like smile again. I just want to know I could feel alive again, not dead. Because it wasn't looking at pictures of Michael that was
Yeah.
difficult for me. It was looking at pictures of myself before Michael died and seeing that spark in my eye and being like, how do I make that come out? That's what I
Oh
want to
yeah. Oh
know.
yeah.
That's what I want to dive into. And so I actually, at that point, I was watching a lot of movies, a lot of documentaries after Michael died. I love documentaries. And I just was sitting on the couch going, what if there was a documentary where widows could all tell their stories and like how they're surviving, how they're living, how they're like honoring their spouse but still building a life for themselves. So this is how crazy I am. I got something called the death gratuity, which is like $100,000 lump sum from the Army. And I hated that name. So I called the people that
Oh, it's a
filmed
terrible name.
I called the people that filmed Michael's funeral, and I said, "Hey, can I hire y'all? I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to call the widow whose husband was killed with my husband." And we go out there to Georgia, and I don't know, I'm just going to ask her how she's doing it. She has a newborn baby, like, and of course those people were like, "Cool, you give us the money, we'll go." But I didn't know what I was
Yeah.
doing. And I called Jessica, and I flew out to Georgia, and we sat there on their couch with her 6-month-old son asleep on her lap. And I remember one of the camera guys going, that was really hard. Like, I did not think I would want to keep doing this after that, because it was so raw. The grief was so raw at that point. We were both like I said, I think 6 or 7 months out.
Wow.
And we went to his headstone, and she showed me what she was doing for her son and what she was doing for herself and how she was living every day. And it was really raw and really brutal and really beautiful. And for a moment, a minute moment, while she was explaining something, I saw that spark, and I said, that's the spark I'm talking about in the pictures. Like, it can come out. How do I extend that
Yeah.
from just a couple of minutes to maybe a day, and maybe from a day to a week? And so, to fast track it, I ended up finding 5 other widows throughout the country, flew out there, filmed them, used the same camera crew to start putting together the documentary. And I was like, look, if I'm a widow, if a widow reaches out to me, I can send her this. And I started at that point a Facebook page, not a Facebook page, a MySpace page, looking for military widows.
Oh wow.
There was not Facebook back then. And it, slowly started growing. And I was on any AOL chat board I could find, just like looking for young widows. And I kept them updated on the filming progress. And then during that time, went on Google and was like, how do I start a nonprofit? And filed my 501c3. And
Yep.
less than I would say probably right around the 1 year mark of Michael's death, I received my 501c3, and the documentary was done. And I had this idea of like, I'm going to rent out my favorite movie theater here in Austin, the Alamo Drafthouse. I'm going to invite widows, and we're not just going to watch this movie at the theater. We're going to go tubing. We're going to go zip lining. Like, let's just like balls out living, And I put it on the MySpace page, and 50 widows ended up flying out on their own penny. And
Wow.
it was
That's
so
beautiful.
amazing, that first event, to just see them all laughing and smiling. And there was no fear in doing it, because we knew everybody around us knew, like, oh, I get it, girl. You're still in pain. You still love your husband more than anything, but you can like feel this. And that was picked up by the Austin American Statesman, who then, I don't know how, it was picked up by the New York Times from there. And from then it was just a snowball of widows finding out about me, and me planning events like, let's go skydiving, let's go swimming with dolphins, let's go whitewater rafting. Like, and I started receiving donations, and getting more major media pieces, picking up the story of, me, this little 20-something-year-old widow, going like, hey, let's go, let's do this. And yeah, 18 years later, it's been a ride.
Wow. It sounds like even in those early days, it exceeded anything you would have even probably put down as a big, amazing, audacious goal of just forming that community. And even just in hearing you tell the story now, this many years later, I see that same spark in you. So I can only imagine how much excitement, or just really just awakening, that brought in you in those early stages of that still dark journey.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some learning. Like for me, after that first event, I was like, I'm only going to max the event out to 10 people, because I wanted to
Yeah.
know their husband's name. I wanted to like really sit down and talk with them. I didn't have knowledge of the nonprofit world at that point. 18 years later, I'm like, oh wow, people are just going to copy your events. They're just going to take more money and do this and that. It's like a ugly little world that I, didn't know about, and I kind of refused to be a part of. And as we gained popularity, as we were receiving major sponsorships, I realized that these people were doing it because I refused to kind of do the status quo and do these large events and do these things that
Yeah.
weren't here to exploit a widow's pain. I remember the Today Show did one event. They filmed one of our skydive jumps, and they were like, can we film during this? And I was like, no, that's when we all sit down and we talk about our husbands and we do that. Like, no, I'm not going to have cameras there for that. Like, I'm not going to have cameras, your interviewers, during this. Like, I'm here with them healing too. And this is not something that I'm trying to take advantage of, because grief is so sacred and it is so beautiful. And there are moments even now where I'm like, golly, when Michael first died, I call it the honey badger era, which was, I did not give a, if I can say it, I did not give a fuck, like I just did whatever I want. I was like, who cares? Right. Like there was like I have nothing to
Yeah.
lose because I've already lost the most important thing, energy, that just made me do things, and like start my nonprofit. And I try to tap into it. I think when something happens suddenly or unexpectedly that is painful or scary, I tap back into that. I'm like, okay, how can I take this energy and translate it into living life more fully in this moment?
Wow. What an incredible journey that's taken you, and then so many other people, right? You just happen to be, like you said earlier on, and finding a way to help make meaning out of this loss. It also represents this idea of the grief journey, right? The grief is still there, the pain of loss. Michael hasn't come back, right? That loss will always be there the rest of this side of life. But yet the rest of your life has grown around it. That's something we hear pretty regularly and see regularly with clients on their grief journeys. Like, No, you never stop missing. Your person never comes back, right? That life doesn't get to come back. But the other parts of your life grow around it. And it's just an interesting, beautiful symphony in many ways, tinged with sorrow and yet filled with what's next.
Yeah, I think for a long time when I was experiencing something, my first thought after the immediate joy of feeling that experience was, I wish Michael could feel that. And 18 years later, I'm like, oh, he is. I do believe he feels it. And I do believe he sees me experiencing these things. And that's, like I said earlier, I feel Michael the most. It's like a paradox. I feel him the most when I am living life the most fully that I could think of, that I am just not bogged down by grief or pain or expectations or control. And so it kind of now becomes like it's a fun high to be like, this moment feels perfect. And instead of going to, but it's going to end, or, but someone could die, it goes to, but like, there's no but. It's just like, I feel Michael here. And I just like say it out loud or silently, like, I love you, babe. Like, I do believe you can cultivate a different type of relationship after they've passed on. And um I do feel him around in the most amazing ways still today, 18 years. It was when I was trying to control the narrative, trying to control how I could feel him and when I could feel him, that I didn't feel him at all. And I thought like, wow, they just die and you don't get to feel them around you. And that's not the truth. It's kind of in that surrender that they come forth.
Hmm. Wow, that's really amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that part because I think some people might be afraid to lean into that feeling or to even let themselves feel that way. So hopefully that'll be an encouragement to them. I want to go back to one of the things you said earlier, which is about you got one of these benefits, the death gratuity, horribly named, as you said. And there's also SGLI and there's other things like SPB and DIC. How did some of those financial resources give you the space, the time, the ability to do so many of these things that you just shared?
I mean, everything. It gave me uh, the ability to create my organization, which ultimately I always tell people, I'm like, I created it because I needed it. You know, I needed to meet other women. I needed to know that I could survive this and thrive through this. So, like I stated, I used a large amount of that to start and run that organization. And then luckily, I did have I grew up in a family that had some sort of financial literacy and was told, hey, at first I just wanted to put the check in a drawer and be like, I never want to look at you again. And my dad's like, look, if it's just sitting there, like at least put it in a CD or put it in some mutual funds.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have no clue. When you're 21, um, and you know, he was very frugal. I mean, I have lots of memories of just living off Slim Fast and I don't know what was it stuff called, those noodles. I was just like, you know, I tried to save up every dollar that he was getting while he was deployed so he could come back and like get his dream car. Like I have no, I mean, even today, I love me a thrift store. I love like calling the hotel and being like, hey, your rate went down. Can you match that price? You know, like I've always been very thrifty. And I think he always instilled that in me too,
Yeah.
which made me also look at that money as something like I don't want to be frivolous. It was easy to look at that money as blood
Mm.
money that I just wanted to get rid of. But instead, I looked at it like, ooh, I can't just waste this. This money is the money that I got for his life from the military with a horrible name for it. Like, I'm not going to play with this. Um, and
Right.
so I did invest, and I even now I live out on some land. I used some of that money. I built an Airbnb. I thought about the life that I wanted, and I thought, how can I take that money and build it? You know, I don't want a 9 to 5. I don't want someone telling me what to do. I want the luxury to be where I want to be when I want to be there. And I used the money in a way that it worked for me to do that. And I've traveled. I took 6 months. I traveled the world. After Michael died, we never got to do a honeymoon for a couple of years, or the first probably 5 years or 6 years. I was like, I'm going to do a once in a lifetime trip once a year on top of the 6 months of travel. I mean, the foundation, we didn't have paid employees or anything for, I think, 8 years. And so I used my money to run that. And we were able to do those events free of charge for
Yeah.
the widows, which was awesome. They could come and they had no costs put on them for that. And even now, I look at my life and I'm like, okay, that money allowed me to do X, Y, and Z, and to also heal. I didn't have to be um, immediately back at work or doing something that didn't allow me to feel my feelings.
Mm.
So I think that
Yeah.
money allowed me to heal, but I don't think that everybody thinks that way. And I think that the money can easily be used as a distraction. It could have easily been used as something to make me go down farther. I feel like when someone dies, you have two choices. You go up or you go down, And even though I went down, I was like rock bottom, solid ground to build upon. Like, let's go up. And I'm not a materialistic person, but I will say, I mean, obviously we live in a capitalistic society. Like, we need money. We need money to live. And I've been able to do it in a way that is authentic to me and still honors my needs and my heart.
Hmm. Yeah. And I see that even now in the ways you've impacted people, right? Money, I tell clients all the time, is a tool, right? It is amoral. It has neither good nor bad characteristics. But when we align it with our hopes and our fears and our dreams, right, to insure against downside and provide opportunity, right, that's when we can utilize it in a way that, what I would say, aligns with your values. So, Taryn, just congratulations on having done that so well, and for a major, major impact in many other ways. It's a testimony to what's possible, right? When, whether you realize it or not, then it's been an intentional approach through the years. So that's incredible to see.
Thank you. I feel like to feel like Michael's looking down going, I'm proud of you, babe. And I'm happy that I can look back up at the clouds or wherever he is and say, I'm proud of me too. Like, it took a long time for me to get
Yeah.
there. And I haven't, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a non-linear journey, grief, as we all know that have been through this. And there's been major downs and major detours and things that have totally thrown me off. But I've always had a really good anchor, I feel like. And I think a lot of that is because of him.
Yeah. The last question before we wrap up, then, it relates to what you referenced a little bit ago, which is some of the challenges of starting a nonprofit going into that world. That's a question that I get pretty regularly from people, especially in your circumstances, where it's like, I want to use the resources for benefit, but it's not all sunshine and roses, as they say, right? What are some things that you would tell people who are thinking about going that road to, like, start educating themselves, be forewarned is forearmed kind of approach before they, dive in both feet?
I was blessed enough to be one of the top 10 CNN heroes one year. And then I was asked to come back the following year. So in that, I was able to meet people running very heart driven missions. And I think that it's a special group. I did not go into it going, oh, this is going to pay my salary, or this is going to, I went into it of like, how can I make this impact? And what do I need to do with what I have? I was like a squirrel, like if I got a donation, I did not think like, oh, let me go spend this donation. I was like, I am so lucky. I can do this for the widows now, but I need to like store some for winter, So the next group of widows, if I don't get any donations, I can still do this. Like, for me, I based the
Yeah.
organization around what are the most important components, and it was serving other widows. And as my organization's transformed over the years, that's changed how I've done it, from in person to virtual, from 10 events a year to now having a drip system. I've always just led from the heart, and I've always only shared what I know. And so I think if people were to start a nonprofit, it's so important that they remember, like, what is my reason? And that reason is what you come back to all the times, especially when you're going through the ups and downs of running an organization. So I always tell people, ignorance honestly was my best tool in starting the nonprofit. I didn't know it was supposed to be hard to start a nonprofit. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just was like, hey, I just want to help people, and let me take the money that I have and try to see which ways I can do that. And then it falls into place. I think
Yeah.
it's like a favorite saying I have of like, we don't live from the wound so often. We're taught to live from the scar, right? Like, we like to see people of like, I
Mm.
surpassed, I lived. It's been 18 years since my husband died. And look at this beautiful healed scar of a human that I am. Oh, no, man. Like, teach from the wound, live from the wound, start your foundation from the wound. Like, I am still figuring it out. I still don't even know what needs are going to be needed years down the road because I'm living it. But it's okay to
Yeah.
teach and to share and to give from that place.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad to hear that you have found that. And I love what you said, mission first, right? Because if you can come back to that, then you can get through anything, the hard times, the unknown times, the unknown unknowns that you didn't even get through. So thank
Yeah.
you so much, Taryn, for coming and sharing your story. Where are the best places for people to learn more about the work that you're doing, connect with you, and get connected with fellow widows?
Yeah. So AmericanWidowProject.org is my foundations page if you're a military widow. I also have my personal website that's not focused solely on military widows, but really resiliency and also nonprofits. And that's my name, Taryn G, as in grape, and then Davis.com. And on there, I can get a little bit freakier, as I say, like a little more honest and raw and nonprofit formed in terms of my experiences with life and widowhood and running my foundation and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I know this will be a wonderful help to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm sending love out to each one of them, and I hope they know that wherever they are, it gets better if they just hold on a little bit longer.
I love that. Hold on just a little bit longer, and we'll end it there.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Widow Life and Money. Want even more resources and information on how to make better financial decisions along your grief journey? Go to www.wisestewardship.fp.com/WLM/EP10, where you'll find the specific resources from this episode. While there, you can also schedule a free, no obligation conversation with Daniel. If you enjoyed the content, please leave us a review and share with other widows who would also benefit from this information. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be used as the basis for legal, tax, or investing advice. Daniel Kopp is the founder of Wise Stewardship Financial Planning, LLC, a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida. Opinions and information expressed are as of the date of recording and are subject to change. The views and opinions of guests on this program are not necessarily those of Wise Stewardship Financial Planning. Daniel and Wise Stewardship Financial Planning are not affiliated with guests or their business affiliates unless otherwise stated.